All right. We're going to be punctual. I'm going to kick this off. So once again, thank you everybody for joining. We are absolutely thrilled to be kicking off the Less Lawn, More Life Challenge. This is our second year running. I am Joanna Hall. I'm the CEO of Planet Wild. Planet Wild is a ecological landscape design firm specializing in rewilding, of course. And we are co-hosting this challenge with Bedford 2030. And I'd like to introduce Eve.
Great, thank you so much, Joe. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm Eve Hunt, the Program Director for Rooted Solutions at Bedford 2030. And I'd like to take just a very quick moment to send a very sincere and heartfelt thank you to all of the partners who have joined with us to build this movement. Your efforts have given us a tremendous boost to our collective goal of creating more sustainable, eco-friendly, and climate-smart yards. We have about 25 partners signed up and more coming every day. So thank you, thank you. The actions that each of us takes in our community towards this goal offers a multitude of benefits. Not only will they help combat climate change through increased carbon sequestration and reduced greenhouse gas emissions, but they'll also address the biodiversity crisis, two of the most pressing issues of our time. By participating in this challenge together, we will protect natural resources, provide cleaner air and water, as well as food and habitat for pollinators and a wide variety of species. So thank you to all of you who have joined this challenge. We're so glad you're here and working collectively for a cleaner, greener, brighter future.
Thank you, Eve. And two other faces that are going to be part of this challenge team, and there's actually many other participants and organizers behind the scene. June Boyle, who is the project lead, there she is, and she is going to remind me that we are recording this to be shared afterwards, and also to put all of your questions directly in the Q&A section, and we're going to be addressing them all at the end. There's also a live chat, so feel free to drop in questions and be chatting as we go here. And I also want to introduce Murray Fisher, the Chief Ambassador for the Less Lawn, More Life Challenge, who has been doing an incredible job bringing in some amazing ambassadors and influencers who are going to be joining us along this journey. Murray, do you want to say a few words?
Sure. I'm just really excited, really humbled to be an ambassador for Less Lawn, More Life. Been on my own personal journey of transforming our yard into a more biologically sort of climate-friendly place. And it's transformed me and it's transformed our whole family. And so I've been working really hard to find my voice and how to go out and talk to people about that transformation, and really excited to be on this journey with all of you. Thank you.
Awesome. So we are going to get to the details of the challenge and how it's going to work here in just a few minutes. I just want to start with sort of explaining why are we doing this challenge. It's actually only our second year, so we are still very much learning. We are open to feedback and ideas and suggestions, but last year we had about 50 participants, and this year we are already well over 800. So clearly there's a moment, there's a real momentum happening. So please don't assume we know all the answers or that we're too precious about exactly how this runs. We really want this to be by and for the sort of community of participants. But why are we doing this? As Eve said, there are over 60 million acres of lawn. Those are pure spaces for opportunity when we are living in this biodiversity and climate crisis. So the overarching goal of the challenge is really to help educate, right? We've been starting to hear more and more about this concept of rewilding and native planting and so forth, but it can be very intimidating. So we're hoping that through this challenge, the webinars, the speakers, even the community itself, right, can help to inform and educate each other. Next is to inform. We have been developing a rating system called the Wilder Ecosystem, which we'll tell you more about. But any data that is shared during this challenge through the surveys and or through the iNaturalist observations are actually going to be feeding the methodology behind this rating system. So really important actual data to continue to feed the momentum. And 3 is to inspire. And I would say this might be the most important, because the more that we can make this sort of the new norm, right? From a behavior and expectation perspective in terms of what beauty is and how we preserve our planet, the bigger it will be, the bigger it gets, the bigger of an impact and dent we can make. And in my mind, this is really what collective action looks like. So you'll hear us asking a lot for you to share and promote and so forth. That's because, if each of us just share this with 2 or 3 or 4 people, suddenly, that's going to have a really big snowball effect. And just quickly, for those who didn't see, talk about, timing being ripe for this challenge. Bedford 2030 and us have been talking about this for months. We had no idea that it was that Good Morning America was going to do a huge piece on it a few days ago about this rewilding movement, but it is just reinforcement that the time is ripe and that more and more individuals are starting to see this, right, as a critical opportunity in our very own backyard. We will drop the links in, so please check it out if you haven't seen it already. Without further ado, I am thrilled to introduce you to our first speaker, Rebecca McMackin. If you don't know Rebecca, she is a ecological horticulturalist with an incredibly impressive background. She's a pioneer in this area, and she is also the author of a TED Talk that went absolutely viral that I think continues to help propel this movement forward. So I'm excited to introduce you all to Rebecca.
Morning, gardeners and landscape stewards. I can't tell you how much it warms my heart to see so many people committed to, cultivating biodiversity. I'm going to share my screen and get this up and running. So thank you for joining this growing movement to shrink lawns and help butterflies and wildflowers. As you probably already know, the American lawn has gotten so far out of control. It's what we do as Americans, right? And we need to rein them in. As Eve and Joe were saying, turf grass is currently the single largest irrigated crop in the United States, with well over 64 million acres, which is larger than the state of Georgia and literally 2% of the United States that is coated in this exotic, water-guzzling, resource-intensive ground cover. Lawn irrigation also uses an estimated 9 billion gallons of water per day, and lawnmowers emit literally 5% of all air pollution in the US. Gardens and native plantings, however, are absolutely wonderful. They're a critical part of encouraging biodiversity. And wow, do we really need to do that immediately? In the United States, and really people think all over the world, we've lost nearly half of arthropods and a third of birds over the last 40 years. So it is time to swing into action and focus on habitat protection, and then even creating habitat where we can, like on our own land. So replacing lawns and plantings and plantings and gardens is important for plants and animals, but it can also help us mitigate the effects of climate change. Because plantings, like if you look at this picture, all this beautiful meadow here, when you compare it to the tiny lawn, those plantings can hold more water in the soil. So imagine water, like a huge torrential downpour, right? And a sort of weather event that would bring flooding. It would sheet off the lawn very easily, but those plantings could slow it down and allow it to percolate into the soil. And then on a hot day, like we've been having more and more, there's so much less soil that is exposed to the sun. And so there's less transpiration that will happen in a planting or a meadow as compared to your normal, even a 3-inch lawn. And so that can literally trap water and reduce flooding. And cities are even now using these sorts of plantings as flood mitigation strategies. Gardens are also cooler than grasses. Just the rate, if you like get one of those thermometers that you can point at stuff, those plantings, all to the left of here, are usually about 10 degrees, at least 10 degrees cooler than the heat that radiates off a lawn, which again can help mitigate urban heat island effect and literally the warming of your area. Those are just some of the many reasons why getting rid of lawns has become this massive movement that we are all part of. And you may have heard of the Kill Your Lawn movement, which I actually think is awesome and like a little punk rock. But I personally like to encourage people to shrink their lawns instead. I have a lawn. I like to picnic. I like to lay in the grass. And as a public park manager, I recognize that lawns can be places where many people feel welcome in a landscape. They communicate to a lot of people that this is your place in a landscape. And I spend a lot of time cultivating habitat for various animals, and I've gotten used to thinking of lawns as the habitat for people. So keeping an area of lawn that you truly appreciate and use is completely fine. In this slide, this is the house of my friend Edwina von Gall, who is absolutely awesome, and you're going to hear from her soon. And she likes to say that lawns should be area rugs, not wall-to-wall carpet. And lawns should really be this precious little place that you have in your landscape. And I encourage everyone, when thinking about how much lawn they need, think about how you want to use it. Do you want to have a picnic? Do you want to have a party? Do you want to play frisbee or baseball? Each of those activities need a different amount of space, and you can figure out your square footage requirements from that. What lawns should not be are default landscape coverings. They should be intentional and well cared for. They should be super lush. You should be able to lay down, and they should be organic, and they should be biodiverse. I never understand why people put like a lawn in a pathway. You know, they almost always fail. And they should just be these precious things. The type of lawns that we often see in this country just exemplify this lack of imagination. In Connecticut, where I'm from, sometimes you can see multiple acres like the side of a mountain with one house in the center of it. And it's not only bad for the environment, but it speaks to how we've lost our ability to relate to land that isn't turf. And I find that, I don't know, it's like a little bit bleak, and it's such a familiar sight. And when you contrast it to a landscape like this, which is Larry Weiner and Associates landscape, you can see it's just completely unnecessary. This house has a wonderful little garden or a wonderful little lawn right in front of the house. And then all around it is this gorgeous landscape that is biodiverse, and it supports regional wildlife, and it makes the lives of the people who live here that much richer. Who doesn't want a cloud of butterflies in their front yard in the summer? I want my son to have an environment to explore in and to like befriend a beetle someday. And I want him to know the flowers and the trees that he shares our land with. So it can be a big investment initially to create a landscape like this, both in effort and money, but over time, it's less work and less expensive than maintaining a lawn, but it's still work. It's just different work, and there's a learning curve. So you've got to be prepared, and don't be discouraged when weeds show up, because they will, they're everywhere. You're going to need to learn to identify those weeds when they're young and figure out how to remove them. And you can use this wonderful app called iNaturalist or all of those other plant identification tools. You can join like a Facebook group or your local Wild Ones chapter, or lean on your community in the Less Lawn, More Life Challenge. Everybody is doing this right now. We can all work together to make it work. So let's talk strategy. First, you're going to, as mentioned, figure out where you need lawn and where you don't. This is the front garden of Benjamin Vogt in the Midwest, and he was not using that like square of green turf that is in front of every single suburban home. And he made it into this mini prairie. And those little squares of green serve no functional purpose whatsoever. They're really just this ridiculous thing, and they're an extension of this bygone bourgeois flex in which people would display their wealth by showing the world that they could use this arable land for literally nothing, and then spend all of these resources cutting the grass really low. and came to the United States via Thomas Jefferson's Monticello. And then in the late 1800s, lawn became this thing for wealthy Americans. And then it spread throughout suburbia after World War II, when lawnmowers, critically, got inexpensive and the weekend became a thing. People could just like futz around in their yard. And then throughout time, lawns, and even in that time, even during that whole era, lawns were not incredibly, but compared to today, they were quite biodiverse. When you bought a lawn mix, it was not just grasses, it included clover and sometimes other plants. But then, right after the war, 2,4-D was invented. And this is the first grass selective herbicide, which means that when you spray it on a lot of crops like corn and rice and wheat, which are all grasses, it kills all of the other plants that are not those grasses. And so the people who made it wanted to find more profitable uses for it. And so they did two things. They manufactured it into Agent Orange. It's the main ingredient in Agent Orange that was spread all over Vietnam and used to defoliate trees. And they spent millions and millions of dollars on an advertising campaign to convince Americans that clover did not belong in lawns. And that, started this entire lawn monoculture movement. And even still today, this same ingredient, the same formulation can be found in over 1,000 different herbicide mixtures. It is still very much with us today. So our work is not just shrinking lawns, but diversifying the lawns that we do keep. People have been researching lawn alternatives for plants for a while now, and Cornell has this wonderful native lawn trial. And these mixes that they use are based on ripping out your lawn and then seeding in plants. But you can also diversify a lawn by seeding into it or planting into it. I've interplanted sedges and clovers and violets and path rushes into a lawn before. And if you go this route, of course, you have to use plants that can take foot traffic. There's different types of lawn alternatives. And when you're using your lawn and you want it biodiverse, you need to make sure that those plants will survive with your level of use. And that, of course, that depends on how you're using your lawn. But sometimes people use lawns not just for playing or frolicking, but just aesthetically. They can be, from a design perspective, a lawn can be like a visual rest that sets off a garden or a hedge or even a building. And those kinds of lawns are far more easy to replace. There's eco-turf grass mixes that I'm sure others will tell you about in this challenge, but there are also many sedges like this Pennsylvania sedge and short grasses that you can use. You can even use unusual plants like these strawberries, barren strawberry out Mount Cuba Cemetery, that will give a landscape that same green mat, like a void, that you don't have to mow as well. One of my favorite ways to replace turf is under trees. It's a great place to start lawn reduction because you can start really small in these isolated pockets. And it's super important for biodiversity. You may have heard of the term keystone species that we throw around a lot. And that means that certain species are they have outsized ecological importance, that a larger number of other organisms rely on that organism to eat or for habitat, what have you. And so Doug Tallamy and other researchers looked at trees and figured out that some of them were keystone species that supported way more moths and butterflies than the vast majority of other trees. And then when you plant them in your landscape, they have a bigger ecological impact. So these are like oaks and willows and cherries. And so the way that they work is that caterpillars eat those leaves of those species. And then, of course, they turn into moths and butterflies. And those caterpillars are hugely important. Birds eat them. Everybody eats caterpillars. Doug Tallamy calls them baby food. And they're just packed with protein. And so those caterpillars eating the leaves, that's just one phase of their life, right? The other phase we know well is the butterfly or moth phase. But after they're done eating leaves, they often, if not most of the time, drop to the ground beneath those trees into the leaf litter or plants underneath those trees in order to pupate or live just the next phase of their life. And so when they land and they're landing on a lawn or a ring of mulch, that's not a great environment for them. Their chances of survival are much slimmer. They need microclimates and the protection that plants and leaves can provide. So entomologist Heather Home coined the term soft landings to describe this practice of using low native plants under a tree to literally catch and protect these moths and butterflies when they fall. And this is a great example of one at Mount Auburn Cemetery. And that's what plants do in nature, right? This is what we're used to seeing. And these plantings can be very simple and utilitarian. This is Boston's Rose Kennedy Greenway. It's in a public lawn that gets absolutely hammered by foot traffic. It's not beautiful, but it works. But what I really love is when they're stunningly gorgeous. And, you know, we can have fun with this. We can use this as an opportunity to bring more beauty into our landscapes. They can be the sites of these gorgeous gardens that run from just outside of the trunk. They usually should be no more than a foot away from the trunk, all the way until the drip line. So the drip line is where the edge of the tree canopy is, and you kind of draw parallel lines down to the soil. And that takes up a lot of space in our landscapes. If we start by getting rid of that space of turf, it's really quite a lot. And when we garden in ways that support biodiversity, one of the most important things is to get comfortable with less tidiness, to keep leaves and bugs and let plants grow together and move around. And it creates these new aesthetics like what you see here, which I find to be honestly one of the most thrilling parts of all of this. It's an aesthetic evolution as well as an ecological one. And people are making new designs that like they literally haven't been done before. And again, there's a learning curve. Some plants love to grow through the leaves that fall on the ground. And then some of them, like Tiarella, will just faint dead away if like 5 leaves get on them. And so plants that I've found so far that like to grow through leaves under trees are Dicentra, wood fern, Christmas fern, mayapple, geranium, some shade-adapted asters and goldenrods, and then plants like Solomon's seal and Iris cristata. And let's all grow that list together so that we can all share that information. But when you're planting under a mature tree, you need to plant very small, and then like use plugs or seeds or at most quartz so that you're not disturbing the root systems of those trees, because the trees really are very, very important. We don't want to hurt those trees. So I think that just to wrap this up, you know, I think that a lot of us have gotten used to this idea that humanity is bad for the earth, that we're like even a cancer, I hear people say. And with this sort of gardening, it's shown me that we can be helpful to the earth, that we aren't always bad, and that it's certain practices that are harmful, and we do not need to do those practices, that we can support the plants and animals that we share the land with. And life is so much better for us when we do. I feel when I go outside, I'm like surrounded by friends. I like say hi to all the flowers and the butterflies, and I know their names. And I so badly want to share that with everyone because it brings me so much joy. I did this TED Talk recently, and I showed this plant, which is Pearly Everlasting or Anaphylis, which is a host plant for the American lady butterfly. And I shared how we planted it, and then butterflies just appeared out of nowhere and immediately started laying eggs on the plant. And without a doubt, the best part of having given that talk has been hearing from people who've had the same experience, especially when they have kids. And when they get to see how they can support those relationships between plants and animals and really care for the land in a way that is helpful. I like to think of gardens as just an incredibly pretty way of taking care of land. And I so hope that as you shrink your lawn, you get to have those same experiences as well. This is the butterfly laying eggs. And I had to literally brush them off the plants to plant them. So it was amazing. And I just want to leave you with this beautiful picture of a garden that my friend Brooke Klausing and I did for the Brooklyn Museum. And all of those strips of wildflowers used to be strips of turf grass. And how much more beautiful is this landscape with all these flowers? People have counted dozens and dozens of species of native bees and butterflies now using this site. And it's in the middle of this incredibly busy intersection, literally on the sidewalk in the middle of Brooklyn. And so I just want to leave you with the thought that if we can make it work here, you can do it in your backyard, wherever you are. Thank you so much.
Amazing, amazing, Rebecca. Thank you so much. That was fantastic. I saw lots of chats going on and lots of questions. What we're going to do now is just quickly run through just a few minutes the challenge itself, give everyone an overview, and then we're going to start answering a couple questions. And of course, join the Facebook group, join the other areas. There's going to be lots more opportunities to engage and get many more questions answered, but we will try to get to as many as we can here in just a minute. Rebecca, you also gave me goosebumps because my husband and I, Dave Baker, we both run Planet Wild together. We actually lived 1 block from that picture that you just took, and we were always hanging out right outside the Brooklyn Museum, and I haven't even seen that. And I'm like, oh my God, talk about bringing it all home. That is incredible. I didn't even know that they did that. Wow. Unbelievable. Okay, so, all right. About the challenge. So very quickly here, it starts today. Here we go. We're off and running. It is going to run for the next 8 weeks. But if you'd like to share it with friends, neighbors, we're going to keep having partners join. Participants are joining. There is no cutoff date. We can have folks join up until the very last week. It is not designed to be highly prescriptive and regimented. You will be, throughout the course of the campaign, receiving weekly emails. We are going to try to keep it to 1 email a week. We don't want this to become spam and so forth, as well as 1 invitation to register for the other webinars, including Enwita von Gaal. You saw some of her photos. She will be one of our guest speakers as well. Before I get into the details of the challenge, I do just want to caveat what we said at the very beginning, which is this is really just about sort of continuing the momentum and having those that are new to this concept feel comfortable and supported by a community to get started. There is no perfect. You don't have to complete all the tasks by any means. Just do the best you can. If at the end of this 8-week challenge, you've listened, you've learned, you've been inspired, and you've planted a couple plants, great. That's already probably more than you would have done. So please don't think of it as a tight routine here. So it's an 8-week challenge. There's one overarching goal: take action on your property, on your land. If many of us are fortunate enough to have our own piece of earth. If you don't, a community garden, share with a neighbor, contribute to your local trail system. But the goal is to take some actions to reduce land on the land, to reduce lawn on the land over which we have agency, and ultimately to support more life. One overarching goal. There are going to be 6 targets. 1 is to reduce lawn to whatever degree you can. So whether that is a few square feet, whether that is 1 area underneath one of the trees, for example, in your yard, like Rebecca was suggesting, or whether you're really ready to let go a big chunk of your lawn that you're no longer using and just let it go wild and see what happens. Just to whatever you're comfortable with, begin to reduce your lawn over the next 8 weeks. The second target is to add native plants. Again, to whatever extent you are able and comfortable in doing so. That could be going to your local nursery and, going to the native section and purchasing, 1 or 2 plants. That could be, propagating and partnering with, neighbors, right, who might have some things that you can actually, bring into your land. The third target is to remove invasive species. Again, maybe that's 20 minutes, maybe that's more. And we're going to give you many more resources along the journey here to support you with each one of these targets. The fourth is to transition some of your lawn care practices. Again, I'll save some of the details for, further elaboration, but that might be reducing how often you mow your lawn, perhaps the length at which you cut it, perhaps how much you water it, all different ways that you can adjust your practices to actually improve biodiversity and carbon sequestration. We are asking everyone to plant one tree, maybe more, but let's start with one over the next 8 weeks. And of course, over the next 8 weeks, target reducing or fully stopping using any harmful chemicals and pesticides on your property. In order to keep this fun and easy and support you along the way, we're going to have 8 activations. So again, in your one email each week, you're going to receive a sort of, think of it as a mini challenge. This week, our Chief Ambassador, Murray Fisher, is going to be kicking it off. So you'll all be receiving that in your inbox. And these challenges are designed to help you achieve those targets and just kind of reconnect you with your land and support you through it. Murray and Eve and team have actually been pulling together some incredible influencers and even celebrities who are going to be helping us with these activations. So stay tuned. I think you're going to be pleasantly surprised with some of the folks that are actually rewilding and that are part of this movement. And last but certainly not least, we want to make as many observations as possible. So you will be invited to the iNaturalist Less Lawn, More Life project page. I put 100+ observations. If you take one photo and share it, that's wonderful. But the goal is to sort of go in your land, connect and observe over the course of, think of it as kind of a ongoing engagement over the next 8 weeks. That, as I mentioned at the very beginning, that data, whether it's through the iNet project page or whether it's through the survey that we will be sending, that is feeding the wilder ecosystem. We're thrilled. Many of you, know of and have heard of Doug Tallamy, founder of Homegrown National Park, incredible author, major pioneer in this movement. He's on the Science Advisory Board for the wilder ecosystem. We've been working with Desiree Narango for about 2 years on this. And so the data that is captured during this challenge is going to continue to feed the methodology. You can see we already unveiled, thanks to the hard work of the team, our initial ratings, and you can see that the goal is to be able to quantifiably prove over time that these changes and that rewilding actually creates a healthier land. And what we ultimately hope, because we all know that intuitively, is that having real science-based reporting and rating associated with a wilder lawn is actually going to help catalyze things like tax credits and so forth. That's going to make this, frankly, really accelerate the sort of making this the new norm. So quick recap. One goal, take some kind of action and spread the word. Let's not be too precious about what that is. Everyone that's participating is already, contributing in a major way. The goal, your target would be to complete all 6 targets to the best of your ability at your own pace, on your own schedule, supported by us, and of course, supported by the community. This is very much a peer-to-peer challenge. Some of us are brand new to this and are sort of, I would say, rewilding curious, and others have been doing this for years. And we're really excited that there's a beautiful blend of those starting to come together in the participation list. The third goal is these 8 activations. Try to complete all of them if you can. They should be fun. They should be pretty quick. If you can't, in 1 week, get it done on your own time, no problem, but please do share them. And then, of course, make as many observations as possible. So we are basically queued up here to get started. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining. When you receive the email, no need to take notes on this. When you receive the email, you will receive links with kind of your action items. One will be to take this survey. It's about 2 to 3 minutes or so, really easy. That's going to help kick you off. 2 is to join the iNaturalist project page. This way, when you take observations, they will be directly associated with the project page on iNet and will be able to contribute to the science. And then join socials. All of this is optional. If you find iNaturalist, to be too cumbersome and you just want to share pictures on Facebook, no problem. If you're not a big, social media person, I am not either. That's okay. No problem. But they are there as resources if you'd like and if you're interested. As we mentioned, we also have some incredible speakers coming up in the lineup, so you will be receiving special links to register for those as well. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Q&A. Just a quick note to say, everyone that participates, we're going to be sharing a Wilder Things badge at the very end of this challenge. There are our incredible partners have been, offering up prizes and so forth. So there's going to be some really fun awards and superlatives that we give out at the very end here. And obviously, the real benefit here is that we all get to kind of learn, engage, and sort of do something fantastic for life on this planet. So let's bring everybody back here, and June, if you want to facilitate and see any kind of major questions that we're getting.
Sure. Yeah, there are a lot of questions in the Q&A. Apologies that the chat wasn't turned on right at the beginning, but we got it on pretty quickly. And thank you all for all the conversations that are happening there. Let's see. There are a lot of specifics about what specific plant to type and to plant and things like that. And I think we're going to save all these questions and be able to inform you later on. But I think a couple of key questions is one of the questions was, is this a Northeast focused challenge or is this expanding nationally? Will there be resources available to those not in the Northeast where this group is based?
Yes, I'll take that one quickly. So this sort of started as a very regional, campaign last year. And thanks to Rebecca's TED Talk and thanks to ABC and thanks to so many other things, this has quickly become a national challenge. So anybody can join. And what we're going to be doing is we are going to be sharing resources that apply to various ecoregions. So there will certainly be a concentration in ecoregion 59, where a lot of our partners exist. And there'll probably be more specifics there, but we are going to make a point, given the breadth of participation that we're seeing, to be able to share resources that apply to other ecoregions across the US as well.
Great. Thanks. The other question that came in, which I thought was interesting, I love the way this individual asked the question. It was related to how does my yard look all year round? They're keen to minimize the lawn and they want to help nature, but they also want home happiness, which I think means that you don't want your yard looking so disheveled throughout the year. So what can people do to or perhaps one of you can answer that question.
Sure, so I can take that one. And I'll pass it back to you, Joe, after that. But it really is, it's garden design, right? It's like the basics of garden design. It's figuring out what you like, what styles you like, and then applying those same things in the areas that you're getting rid of your lawn. A lot of what we tend to like in a landscape is that it looks cared for, that it doesn't look neglected, right? There's tactics that we call cues to care that like will mow an edge around a garden to show that this isn't just wild, this is like a defined space. Or there will be an edge of mulch in front of those plantings to, again, give it definition and show that it's intentional and not just let go. As far as winter interest goes, you can Google native plants for winter interest. There's a lot. And it takes all different forms. It doesn't just need to be evergreen foliage, although there's that as well. There are red berries and orange berries on plants that you can plant. There are many of our native herbaceous perennials like heuchera and some milkweeds that instead of melting away or dihessing entirely during the winter, they turn purple or orange. And so you get these beautiful colors and textures all throughout the winter. Same thing with sedges and grasses. They can have a winter presence, even though it's not the same thing as like a meatball taxus or a boxwood, it still has a beautiful presence in the landscape. Anything to add to that, Joe?
No, I mean, that was perfect. I wrote down when you were speaking earlier, an aesthetic evolution. I love that.
I want to add on that aesthetic evolution, Rebecca, because I have a sort of meadow. Part of it is unmowed, part of it is wildflower meadow. It's very messy in the winter. I was okay with that. My wife wasn't. but I actually, so I was cutting it every winter, which is a lot of work. And what I did this last winter is I let all of the stalks stay up, mostly, wildflower stalks. And what's interesting is it seemed to reduce the browsing by the deer. All of those stalks seem to reduce the browsing by the deer of all of my wildflowers. And also obviously it's more habitat for bees to have those stalks. And so it was, as a family, we're changing what's beautiful and what we can bear and what looks ugly or what looks cared for. It's really individual and it's just trial and error. And that was just an interesting thing that we saw, is that I had far less deer browsing on all of my precious, wildflowers.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. The other thing I'll say for anyone who hasn't seen or sort of been exposed to Pete Udolph, that also changed my mindset about what's beautiful. And now I feel like I love I love the dead, beautiful, things that are left in the winter almost as much. So, to your point, Murray and Rebecca, I think a lot of it is just experimenting, seeing different things, and just starting to change the way that we, perceive that. I'm going to make sure we get as many questions to Rebecca as possible. So,
Okay, real quick, Joe, can you pop that name in the chat and that you just mentioned? And thank you. One of the things we had our typical one of the usual suspects came up in the question about ticks and letting your lawn grow. So Rebecca and
Sure.
I noticed one of our scientists answered it as well, but take it away.
Cool. It is such an important question here in the Northeast and really all over the country. Ticks are a legitimate threat to people's health and especially our children, right? I'm in Connecticut where Lyme disease is no joke. And so the reality, we need to keep in mind that ticks are everywhere. And you need to do your due diligence in protecting yourself from them at all places. But there is research that shows where ticks tend to congregate, where they tend to breed, what sorts of ecosystems they like to frequent, and that differs between the species of tick. So here we have 3 species of tick. We have dog ticks, Lone Star ticks, and black-legged ticks or deer ticks. They're the same thing. We used to say deer ticks, now they're black-legged ticks. Deer ticks are the main danger because they carry Lyme disease. Dog ticks and Lone Star ticks also can carry some diseases, but those diseases aren't usually as serious as Lyme, and they are far less prevalent in the ticks. Whereas so many deer ticks and black-legged ticks have Lyme disease, far fewer Lone Star ticks actually carry disease, and dog ticks as well. So deer ticks are the most important ticks to watch out for, and they don't want to live on your lawn. Deer ticks like to be in this place called the ecotone, which is where the turf, your landscape really hits a forest. And it's that shift between 2 ecosystems, and they want to be in a moist environment. They like to be in leaves, they like to be in shrubs, they love stone walls. And so if you go outside and you look at your landscape, you can figure out where those ticks are, and then stay away from those areas, which is what I do. Our landscape is 60% ecotone. And we just know that if we go into those spaces, that we need to be extra protected. There are also practices that many people here have done for decades, which is to rake the leaves off of our lawn and dump them in the ecotone, which is just bolstering this tick habitat, right? Really cultivating it for everybody. And we just can't do that anymore. The best thing you can do is just stay out of those transition zones and leave them alone. And then just, again, due diligence as far as protection is concerned. But they have looked at, when you let a lawn go, when you have a lawn and you stop mowing it, do you get more deer ticks? And the answer is absolutely not. You don't. They don't want to live in those environments.
Great. Thank you. One other question, which someone asked at the very beginning, but I thought it was a good one. Maybe we can close with. There are plenty of other questions. We've answered a lot of them in the Q&A. We've answered some of them in the chat. You're going to get more answers to your questions about specific links and apps and things in the email that's going to come to all participants later today. But this one was, we're the choir here today, right? Even those who are just curious versus the ones who've been doing this a long time. How do we preach to those not already in the choir? And a related question was, somebody wants materials that they can share with their neighbors, to particularly those who are still spraying their lawns, for instance. So who do we go to? How do we start preaching to the choir? And it's a philosophical question, I guess, but somebody suggested, do we talk to our realtors? Do we talk to our town conservation and sustainability boards, et cetera? And some of those are our partners, actually. So we are starting that process, but I wanted to let you all have a chance to comment on that.
I mean, I would say yes, all of the above. This is a war on many fronts, and we can do all tactics, and they're all helpful. I think that the efforts of this group, of the Planet Wild group, is like incredible, right? Like, think about the exposure that news story got, and that these videos will get shared far and wide. It's really this massive movement that is happening, and people are curious. I think we are the best ambassadors, though, when it really comes down to it, making these landscapes, talking to our neighbors, going to town meetings and sharing results and encouraging others. And then I'm a big fan of beauty as a propaganda technique as well. Like, I think that when we make these landscapes look pretty, it gets a lot of converts. Like, there's honestly nothing inherently beautiful about lawn, right? Like, I don't know why we've all accepted it as being pretty. It's not. It's just this flat green plain. And we can make such rich landscapes when we really do try.
And I would just like to add, as far as, reaching people, and Bedford 2030 is a convener. We communicate, we educate, and then we also motivate and inspire our community to take action. But when we look at behavior change, and we've studied behavior change, the number one motivator of people is a friend or a neighbor who is taking action and doing something. So don't underestimate your own personal power, because that is the number one behavior change motivator.
The other thing I'll add, in addition to beauty, and talking to our neighbors, and part of the reason that we're putting together this wilder ecosystem is we're trying to quantify and make it simpler to communicate to people the benefits in a way that maybe it can start making some policy changes. So that right now, for example, in Bedford, a lot of people who have land, they preserve that land. I mean, they have that land preserved because they get an agricultural exemption on taxes. And so we're thinking, well, what about a similar conservation exemption if you rewild part of your property? And so I think if we can go to people who don't care about the beauty, or they think lawns are beautiful, and we say, actually, you can get a reduction in your taxes, you're sequestering more more carbon, you're increasing habitat for endangered and threatened species. All of a sudden, if we can quantify that better, communicate it clearly to policymakers, that will be another way to appeal to people beyond the, oh, we like butterflies because they're pretty crowd. And so that's one of our main aims in the development of the wilder ecosystem.
I have nothing to add. Those were just perfect responses. I think we should end there. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining. Maybe I'll add one thing, which is one thing we can all do is just invite one other neighbor to the challenge. And if we all do that, we're already doubling our volume and going from there. So please spread the word. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Rebecca, you're a huge inspiration. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you, team. And this will be recorded. I saw that question come in a lot. So, no one's missed anything. This is just the very beginning. And please, feedback, suggestions. We're super excited to get this rolling.